Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're going to paint an underwater shipwreck with some structures in the distance that could be natural formations, they could be the lost city of Atlantis, who knows? If you haven't yet already, make sure you click that subscribe button and then check out the video description below for a full list of materials. Now let's get started. Today I'm starting with a brand new canvas and I haven't gessoed this or primed it or anything. The only thing I did to it was I wet the back. Now the reason for that is twofold. First, it's going to help tighten my canvas a little bit, but it's also going to prevent my paint from drying too quickly. So I hear a lot from you guys that live in dry climates that you have a hard time with your paint drying too quickly. Just make the back of your canvas a little bit wet. Don't soak it and let water pool in the frame. Just take a wet brush and brush across the entire back of the canvas, and that will help prevent your paint from drying out so fast. I'm going to start with my 1-inch flat brush, just wet it in my jar, and wipe it on the edge. I started painting this and then I changed my mind halfway through, so that's why my palette is a bit of a mess today. So I'm going to load up with Phthalo blue paint. Remember how we squish it into the paint and that sucks it up like a sponge. So I'm just going to load up really good with that blue. I'm going to grab a little bit of Phthalo green and just a corner of white. Now I'm going to start down here at the bottom, and all of my brush strokes are pretty much going to go side to side. And I like to just take the tip of my brush and go like that and just lay down a lot of those colors that I just picked up on the end. So I laid down some of the green and the white, and then I'm going to take it back and forth across the bottom here. Heavier pressure to lay more paint down, and light pressure to blend colors together and smooth out lines. So right there I'm using full pressure to lay down the paint, and then lighter pressure across it to get rid of any lines. Let's do that again. Only this time I'm going to pick up a little bit more white than last time. Lay it down above, and I'm going to do these lazy X's. Notice I'm still above that line. I'm just going to lay this down first, and then I'm going to come back to the center, lazy X's back and forth down into that color that I just did. See how far down into it I went? I didn't come to here and stop and try and blend that. I'm taking those lazy X's all the way down. And then super light pressure, just barely touching, just to get rid of some of those lines and water drips. I'm not really worried about that water drip because I'm going to add more down here later. I'm just going to pick up some blue. I didn't pick up a ton of blue, and I'm going to pick up more white. Deposit it there. Lazy X's back and forth above that last color. Back to the center and lazy X's down into it until it disappears. See how it just disappeared? I can go back up into it. Light pressure to streak it out. Just a tiny bit more blue, maybe just a tiny hint of green, and more white. Don't worry about getting this perfectly blended color. If you have some variation, some spots that are a little lighter or darker, that's perfectly fine. This is underwater, so there might be some light kind of reflecting differently in different places. I am just going to pick up white this time. Well, maybe just a little bit of blue and a tiny hint of green. Now I am just picking up white. I still have a lot of blue on my brush, so if I put some heavier pressure on here, I'm going to deposit more of that blue. And here and there I am applying a little bit more pressure. This is going to be our sky. See how I turn my brush on my edge there? I don't really want to take that down into that color I just did, so I'm using the edge of my brush That helps get a nice smooth transition too. I'm not quite so worried about blending out brush strokes in the sky. I want the sky to be a little more dynamic. So in fact, I'm going to take a little bit more white and just kind of scoot it through here in a couple of places. It's a little on the thick side there. And now I have this super soft brush. It doesn't matter what kind of a brush. It doesn't matter if it's round or flat or smaller than this. You just want a brush that's pretty soft and it's clean and dry. And now I'm gonna come to the bottom edge mostly here and just ever so lightly, I'm really just kind of using the corner of the brush. I'm just kind of dusting back and forth over some of the edges that are a little stronger than I want them to be. See, just that corner of my brush is touching, nothing else. And because I wet the back of my canvas, the paint that I applied before is still nice and wet, so it's helping this color to blend in. Any other spots that you feel are a little too strong, just lightly dust over them. I'm going to go to this little flat brush, and it's quite soft. It's roughly 1/2 inch. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to be real specific with it. I'm going to come in and grab what I have left of my white, and I'm going to sketch out the top of my wave, just with the very tip of the brush. And I'm going to go pretty high with it here. Just kind of come down and back up. And it doesn't matter how it's shaped. Shape it however you like. You can't see that real well, but it doesn't matter because that's just an indicator of where we're going to put everything else. So I'm going to take the same brush. I still have some white on it. I'm just going to mix some blue. Just kind of pick up some of that phthalo blue. Come back over here. And again, because I wet the back of this canvas, this paint is all still wet. So I'm going to get it to blend in really easily. I'm going to come right to the edge of that white that I just laid down and kind of start streaking this in. It's a little bit of an arced shape, so it's going to be wider here, and it's going to kind of come to the same point right about here. And see, it's blending in with that undercolor, and I'm using the lightest pressure possible right here so that it just fades out. Let's get a little bit more, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Don't worry about that center area. We're going to paint over all of that. Now, if your underpainting has dried at this point and you're having a hard time getting it to blend, like right here, it's just a tiny bit drier. And I'm just going to come in and grab a little point of white. I still have the blue on my brush, so they kind of mix, and it helps blend it out a little bit more. Just get rid of any brush stroke lines. I actually want to darken this side just a little bit more. All right, I'm going to take some matte medium. Now even here, my paint is still a little bit wet, so you can see a fingerprint where I just touched and I've got some paint on my finger from it. So I'm going to load up with matte medium quite a bit. I'm going to create almost like a sunken city or some interesting rock formations. And I want the ones in the distance to really almost fade out. The matte medium is going to thin down the paint so it's more transparent, so these elements will blend into the background a little bit more. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to load up with some green and some blue. A little heavier on the green than what I used before. Just make sure that it's nice and thinned out with that matte medium. I'm using that 1/2 inch flat brush again, and I'm just gonna use the edge. I'm gonna come in here and just start kind of sketching out some shapes, just small, kind of up and down streaks. Not trying to get anything specific. They can be a little messy, they don't have to be perfectly straight. And it is blending in just a bit with that background color that I used because it's still wet. Now I'm going to take my brush flat. With light pressure, I'm going to come straight down and angle off to the side. So the entire time my brush stayed flat. As I came around, I didn't curve it. It's just flat and streak to the side. And that's going to start giving it that blended into the ground look. I'm just picking up a little more of the blue-green. I didn't pick up any more matte medium, but there is still some on my brush. And I'm just going to give a couple of little darker spots in here. Mostly on the right-hand side, because I want it to seem like there's light coming from the left and the center. Again, flat, but almost no pressure on my brush. Just dust that down. Let's get just a tiny speck of white on the end. I didn't pick up much at all. And I'm going to put it on the other side of these elements and just give them some very faint highlights. Very, very faint. If anything is too strong, don't worry about it right now. If you wet down the back of your canvas, it will keep it nice and wet, and then you can blend it out. Actually, I'm just going to pick up some of this matte medium mixture. And like this one, I feel like is too strong, so barely touching it, I'm just dusting it a little bit. I just want to insinuate highlights on this most distant one anyway. All right, now see all these little spiky bits at the bottom here? That's what we're going to get rid of when we go flat and over. And that tiny hint of white that we have on our brush and that we're grabbing out of these structures is helping to start highlight our ground. You can even grab just a tiny bit more white if you want. And get it in there. Painting like this with your canvas slightly damp on the back, to me, it feels like the closest I can get to painting with oil paint while using acrylic. So there's our distant structures, and it looks strange over here, but I'm not worried about that because I'm going to add some more that are closer right here. All right, I'm going to load up with some more matte medium, maybe not quite as much as last time. And I'm going to grab some more green blue, maybe just a little heavier on the blue than the green. We're going to do the same thing, and it'll overlap these first structures. I can tell my canvas is starting to dry out just a little bit and getting some skipping. All right, right, flat again, super light pressure, down and over, making sure to keep your brush flat. Don't turn it. Don't worry about blending it in the ground area with that back part that we just did. These are a little bit closer, so there might be a little more definition in the ground. See here, that darker line kind of insinuates that it's raised up and covering part of this back here. Lay a little more dark in there because I kind of lost it. Now I'm just getting green and blue. I'm not going to pick up any more matte medium. And again, we're going to give some low lights. Add some little darker areas in here. And then just a little pinpoint of white on the end and add some highlighted areas on the front. Just streaking that white on right now, not worrying about blending it. And just wipe that off and grab matte medium. I'm not cleaning off my brush at all. And then anything that's too hard, like right there, just barely touch it with the matte medium and lightly streak over it. And I want to darken up that line here just a bit. So I'm going to come on the edge and turn my brush just so I can really define that line. And let's go even bigger. I wiped my brush off pretty good. I didn't clean it off. And now I'm not gonna grab matte medium, just green and blue. Mostly blue. And again, it's gonna be taller. Maybe my brush strokes are a little bit heavier. And it's absolutely gonna overlap this last one. Picked up just water, just a little bit of water, because I'm starting to get some breaks here because my canvas is drying out. So it's not blending with those underpainting colors quite so much, but I don't want to use matte medium and make this part as transparent. I'm also getting breaks because this brush is quite soft. Remember, a softer brush is gonna have a little bit of a harder time pushing into the texture of the canvas. I'm just filling that in. And I load it up with my blue-green, and I'm just gonna grab a speck of white. And come in here and do our flat swoop to the side. Just kind of going back and forth between some green, blue, and some white. See, I'm still using the edge, but as I came down, I put full pressure, just deposits a little bit more paint so I can get a darker area in there again. All right, let's add some highlights and lowlights to our ground. So we've already kind of started it, and I'm still using this little flat brush, loading up with some matte medium, and just pulling out a little bit of white. So I didn't mix the white with the medium. I've got medium on my brush and I've got a little bit of white paint, and they're pretty separate. So I'm gonna come in here and keep my brush level. I'm just using the tip of the brush and just start sketching out where I want some highlights. keep it pretty level, but it can come up a little bit if your ground does. As you come back to here, you're gonna have these be much, much smaller, much fainter. Don't worry about this actually looking like highlights right now. We're just putting down the white. This is gonna stay wet because of the matte medium, but also because our canvas is wet on the back. I'm gonna apply a little more pressure, get some wider streaks as I come forward here. Take that up just a bit. Let's go into our blue-green and still some matte medium. And we're gonna kind of work between the spaces here, but don't try to keep them completely separate. If it overlaps your white and streaks your white a little bit, that is perfectly okay. This is actually very similar technique to how we did the little creek in last week's video, the Impressionistic Spring Creek. Very similar technique. So let this color kind of go over that white because it will streak it. You'll get a little bit of blending. But I'm using almost no pressure. And when I go over some of the white, if the white is dry, then I'll either cover it with this transparent blue-green mixture, which will still show a highlighted area, or I'll pick up a little bit of that white and deposit it somewhere else. And just like in the Spring Creek video last week, you can keep working on these reflections, or light reflections, until you have it the way you like it. And the more layers you add here, I think the happier you'll be with it. See how this white in the back is still wet? So it's still streaking with that blue and matte medium that I have on my brush. Let's throw in just a little more white. It's really scattered, so don't get this pattern dot, 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 dot all the way across. Just lay your white down where you want it. You know, like that. That's perfectly okay. But the way we're painting, there's nothing wrong with laying down a hard blob of white like that. And then we'll pick up some more blue-green, a little bit of matte medium, and barely touch, come back and just streak out a little bit of it. Just be super careful not to be heavy-handed. Don't and flatten out your brush there, because you're just gonna wipe that all away and get a big smoothed out blob. So let me show you how I'm bracing myself to get this even, very, very soft pressure without putting my hand on the canvas. I'm standing here and I've got my elbow resting right on my hip. It's just right there. So my arm's not free and kind of swinging. My elbow is planted on my hip, and that way I can just move the tips of my fingers and get the slightest pressure possible. If you have your arm hanging out like this, you can still do it with some practice, but it's gonna be a little more difficult. So if you stand to paint, just plant that elbow right in your hip, and then you can just move the tips of your fingers. You'll get the pressure that you want. You can take these highlights all the way across here if you like. I'm gonna have some other elements over there, so I'm not too worried about it. What I do wanna do though, is get a little more medium and a little speck of white on the end, and just add some highlights to some of the ridges coming down off of our structures. Still have my elbow planted on my hip. So I'm just adding in the light, just like we did there, not worrying about it blending. And then I can come back in, get my darker color, still with matte medium, especially on these back ones, because I don't want to darken them up too much. And just dust out those lines. Just picked up matte medium there to help streak that line out. I'm not worried about this corner. I'm gonna put some rocks there. All right, now I'm gonna use a little bit of transparent mixing white along with matte medium. You can also use zinc white, and if you don't have either of them, you can try and use titanium white, but you need to be very, very careful with the titanium white. If you use too much, you're just gonna get these big bright white streaks instead of light rays. So to be on the safe side, I'm using transparent mixing white. I'm still using my little 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm gonna load up with some matte medium. A good amount, but not overboard, just really get it into the bristles. I'm gonna come to my transparent mixing white, and I'm just gonna pull out a little bit, not a lot, and mix it in with the matte medium. Now this paint is pretty dry now, so I don't have to worry about mixing anything. I'm gonna put the edge of my brush right on the line here for the wave. But again, what we do right in here doesn't really matter. We're gonna paint over all of it. But this is where I'm gonna start. So I'm gonna take that very light pressure. See, my brush isn't really bending, just a little bit. And light pressure, I'm just gonna streak it downward. And then come back, overlap that line, and just break that line up a little bit on either side. Just like that. I'm gonna mix up some more. And I'm gonna do another one. Now, it's all gonna kind of fan out, so kind of like the hands on a clock. So I'm not gonna have one here that jets off this way. It's all gonna be a nice, even arc. So this one's gonna be angled just a little bit more that way. And I'm using the lightest pressure possible. And take it down just a bit. Super light pressure, you can barely see that, but it's gonna be really effective. Just keep that brush nice and moist, but use the matte medium. Don't get some water, because I think that using too much water here is gonna spread that paint out, deposit too much paint. So I'm just using matte medium when my brush gets dry. Just short little rays on the sides here. And I'll bring just a few, very, very faintly, down a bit lower. If you get one that you feel like is too strong, you might want to wait until it dries, especially if you're using the transparent mixing white, because it will dry a little more transparent. But if you're concerned that it's not going to, just pick up a little bit of matte medium on the end of your brush and streak over it. But the matte medium itself looks kind of white when it's wet. So unless it's shockingly bright, you might want to just wait until it's dry and see. I picked up just a tiny bit more of the transparent mixing white there, and I'm going to use the edge of my brush and super, super light pressure. Just do it really quick. Grab some matte medium, and with light pressure, I'm just going to swipe over that just to break it up a little. All right, I've cleaned off my brush. I'm going to come into my blue and pick up a bit of that on one side. Blue on one side, not on the other. Then I'm going to flip it over, come over to my white, and load up with white on the other side. So I have blue and I have white. Now I'm going to point my brush so that the white is up, and I'm just going to use the edge. I'm going to start on the edge of my wave here with my brush right on that line. And light pressure, I've got my pinky bracing myself. I'm going to bring it down and back up to meet the wave again. Now I'm going to do that again. I'm going to pick up just some blue on one side and just some white on the other side. It doesn't matter if you hold the white up or down on this part. We're just going to use the edge still and come in and just fill this in just with very light brush strokes back and forth. I'm going to use just a little bit of matte medium because my brush is getting kind of dry. Take it all the way to that line we made in the back. Now we can work on, we've got that all filled in, now we can work on adding in some little highlights and lowlights. It's really noisy out on my street today, so if you guys hear some growling, it's just a trillion motorcycles going by. And if it starts blending too much and you're getting frustrated, then just step away from it, let it dry, and come back. And I actually think I'm going to do that. But in the meantime, I'm going to work on the edge of the wave here. So my brush is still all gunked up, covered in blue and white and matte medium. I'm just going to pick up a little blue and maybe just a little bit more matte medium. Super light pressure. I've got my pinky braced on my canvas. I'm just going to use the very tip of the brush and just kind of sketch down around that edge. Let's take that whole muddy blue-white matte medium mixture and go into these darker areas, which this part right here is also the surface of the water. So just like here we have reflections and shadows, right here we're going to, and it's going to fade back until you don't see it anymore. So that's what we're going to work on. I'm just going to come in here, use the edge of my brush, and just start streaking some in there. And I'm getting little bits of white and blue because I've got it all on my brush. Now, as we start to get down to about right here, your brush may be losing paint at that point, which is going to help you get a nice faded out look. But if it's not, just lighten your pressure until you're seeing nothing come off of your brush. And that's when you know you're done. So I didn't pick up any more paint. This is the same load that I was doing over here. I might pick up a little more blue though. I'm kind of losing my blue. A little white and a little matte medium. And right there, it fades out into the background until you can't see it anymore. All right, I'm gonna use this little 1/4 inch angle brush, and I'm just picking up white paint, no matte medium. Notice I didn't load my brush with it, I just picked up a little in the end. And we're gonna really work some of the highlights up here because this would be nice and bright. So I'm putting my hand on my canvas, this is all pretty dry. And along the edge here, we're just gonna barely touch and start streaking a little bit of this bright white in. Don't be afraid to get some nice bright areas and some nice dark areas. The more contrast you have in here, the better. But notice I'm also not just drawing a hard white line all the way across. I'm just kind of sketching it on. And we'll add some in through here. From the back, from the surface, kind of sliding some down a little. So we might have a heavier reflection right there. Now I am going to pick up just a little bit of matte medium. And any of these areas that were too strong, just kind of going over them, again with the super light pressure. If I put too much pressure here, I'm going to lay down more of the white paint that's still on my brush. So I'm just using the matte medium to help streak it a little. Just keep that alternating between white and matte medium going, and work the highlights on these top edges until you're happy with them. Remember, the matte medium is used to help kind of smooth colors, make them a little bit more transparent, keep them open a little bit longer. We will add just a few in here. I didn't pick up any more. I'm still just using that little bit of the white and matte medium that's on my brush. I'm just gonna add a couple to this underside, very softly. I don't want them quite as stark as on the surface. Let's grab a bit of blue. I didn't clean off my brush. There's still a little white on there. Tiny speck of matte medium. And we'll get in some of our darker ripple colors. Just use very little paint here. The more paint you use, I think the harder it's going to be to blend things out and get it to look the way you want it to look. So use very little paint. You can always get more. I wiped off a bunch of my paint there and I just picked up matte medium. I feel like my waves and breaks are just a little bit too small here. I'm actually going to put a little more pressure on my brush and let some of them widen out just a little bit more. I'm still using my angle brush, little matte medium back to my transparent mixing white. I am gonna add just a few more of those little rays. Like I said, when it dries more transparent. And that's because the matte medium has some white to it too. Like this part where I was concerned that it was too heavy, notice you can barely see it. So I'm gonna come in here with this and just lightly streak a couple more in. Right now I'm going to take a little piece of chalk and sketch out our ship. So I'm just going to decide where it is, maybe right about here, and I kind of want it angled up a bit. We'll have a little part kind of jutting out here, and maybe an old mast that's kind of crooked. Just a couple of them. I've got my 1/2 inch angle brush. I wet it in my jar, load up with some matte medium, some green and blue, quite a bit. I want a little less matte medium to paint this time. Some more paint than medium. And I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of black and mix that in with my paint. And just start filling in the shape here. Keep a little water on your brush if you're getting some breaks in the paint from the canvas texture. Take that same color and the edge of my angle brush. Maybe I'll put a little more pressure on it down here at the bottom to widen that out. And it doesn't matter if these are straight or if they have a weird bend in them. This ship has been at the bottom of the ocean for a long time. All right, let's take that same color mixture with our matte medium in it, and I load it up, and I'm just gonna come in and just touch the white. So I just picked up just a tiny bit of it, and we'll give it a little bit of highlight, mostly on this top area here. So I'm gonna start at the top edge. And then I'm gonna swoop it down, kind of following this shape of the boat. Little matte medium, a little bit more white, and let's do that again. Just kind of starting right at the edge and streaking it down. And it can be really uneven. You can have spots that are quite a bit brighter than others. I'm gonna have a little bit less of the highlight toward the back here. Let's grab that color mixture again. A little more matte medium. And I'm going to streak up from the bottom just to make sure that we didn't take any of that highlight too far down, or that we don't have any abrupt endings to it. Matte medium and some white, kind of mixing it in there. I've still got those other colors on my brush, so now I've just got a little bit of a lighter version. And I'm just going to do just a tiny bit more. Really play with some of those highlights. And I'm actually going to grab quite a bit of black now. Just mix it with that mixture on my brush and darken down here. I decided I want this quite a bit darker. Right here where that black and the blue color meet, I'm just going to streak over that, make sure there's not a hard line. Going down to my little angle brush, load up with that black blue matte medium mixture. And a tiny bit of white. And we'll add a little bit of the highlight onto our posts, right at the top edge. You can kind of sketch it on there if you've got a dark spot on the top edge. That's just going to help kind of say that the water ripples are reflecting onto it. Get some brighter white in there. Just add a couple little specks of it. Especially as we get up to towards the tip, because it's a little bit closer to the surface. Be as detailed as you want here. Spend the time that you need to spend to make things look the way you want them to look. As always, you can play with these shadows and highlights until you're completely satisfied. And if you're not completely satisfied and it's just getting a mess, then let it dry and paint over it and come back to it. Just getting some nice bright spots right here because it's directly underneath our light. I'm using a mixture of the matte medium and the white. Just barely touching the edge there to insinuate a bit of a highlight. All right, a little more white and let's highlight our masts. Now keep in mind where your light source is coming from. The light is up here, so my mast wouldn't be highlighted on this side, just on this side. And a little less toward the bottom of it. A little on the top edge here. Nice and bright. That's almost just pure white that I'm just barely touching onto there. Zoom you in there nice and close so you can see that they're just little tiny streaks. Got that little tiny bit of white on the end of my brush, and I'm just kind of touching, and that's it. Just about like that. So up close it's going to look kind of strange, but then when you stand back, I'm going to take a slightly darker color than that white. Once you stand back, it's going to look like little bits of the sunlight reflecting through the top of the water onto it. So let's highlight this one, and then we can move on. I'm kind of going back and forth between my dark mixture and my light mixture here. All right, let's add some rocks at the base of our ship. So blue-green, I'm using my 1/2 inch angle brush. A little bit of black, a little bit of matte medium. And we're gonna put them at the base of our ship here. Just kind of wiggle your brush as you go. Just get some kind of irregular shapes going there. And I'm gonna let it trail off right there. Now I know that's quite a bit darker than our ground here, but matte medium is gonna make it so that we can easily blend that in. So don't stress about that. And every time I use matte medium, I get asked, can I do this without matte medium? You can do anything you like. Will you get the exact same results? No. I know that matte medium can be a little pricey. See, I just picked up matte medium there, and I'm lightly streaking over the base of that dark color that I laid in. And look at that. It looks like it's blending in with what we already did. I'm using super light pressure. Again, I've got my elbow planted on my hip. Just streaking that over. And even though that ground was dry, it looks like it's blended in, but it's not. It's just transparent over the top of it. So again, I know that matte medium can be kind of expensive. I just had to buy a new bottle of it today, and it was, I think it was $25, but I had a coupon, so I only paid $16 for my big bottle of matte medium. But the thing is, as long as I've been using matte medium, I think I started using it probably late summer last year. This is the first time I've replaced my bottle, and I use matte medium a lot. So if I can make a bottle of matte medium last me that long, you can make a bottle of matte medium last you even longer. Because, you know, I'll paint the same thing over and over in one day and go through a ton of matte medium. If you're just painting, you know, on a regular basis, you're not quite as, you know, back and forth as I am, then a bottle of matte medium is going to last you a long time. You're not going to go through that bottle in a few days or even in a few weeks. It's going to last you for a long time. So I highly recommend you get some matte medium, especially if you paint with me a lot. If there's one medium I would tell you to get that you absolutely should have, especially if you're painting with me, that's matte medium. So I'm just going back and forth between my dark color and my matte medium to smooth it out, get a nice shadow under my boat there. Let's add some more rocks on the other side. Now these rocks on the other side, I am gonna go a little bit more with the black. These ones are gonna be darker, they're closer to us. The boat is pushed back just a little bit, and these rocks right here are gonna be a little bit closer. I'm gonna make them a little bit bigger. Again, I'm just kind of wiggling my brush as I go. We'll bring it about to there. And just fill it all in. I don't think I picked up any matte medium with that. I still have some on my brush, but I didn't pick up any specifically with this part. Okay, we have our blue-black mixture, our matte medium. I'm gonna go quite a bit of matte medium here. And a little speck of white. Again, I didn't mix it with anything on my brush. I just picked up a little bit of it. I'm gonna come into my rocks, specifically the rocks back here, because if our light is coming down this way, it's probably not hitting these ones too much because the boat is over top of them, but it might be hitting these ones. So I'm using the edge of my angle brush, and I'm just gonna come in and start kind of streaking. It's not just at the top edge like that. It kind of comes in, and you might even have some parts that move that way or, you know, that way. So a lot of times when we paint rocks, people will show me their rocks and say that they don't like them, and what I see is, you know, an outline like that around the edge of everything. And I think that that's probably why you don't like them. So streak that outline, get it, you know, to move in different directions. Rocks have so many faces to them, and you know, you're gonna have, obviously with your highlight coming from the sky, you're gonna have a little bit more brightness right on the top edge like that, certainly. But you are gonna have some on this face that's facing you here maybe. Maybe not as much, maybe just as much. You get to say where your highlights are. But one thing they're not is just around the outer edge. We need to think of things as being three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. They don't just have an outer edge, they've got front faces and back faces and side faces, and they point all kinds of directions, so highlight them in all kinds of directions. And again, some matte medium just to make sure that we've got a nice smooth transition into the ground there. I'm gonna put just a little bit of a highlight in here, but not a lot. Let's get a little more of a highlight in our ground right here. A little blue-green without the black in it to kind of streak it and blend it in. Don't worry about going over top of these rocks. We haven't highlighted them yet, so. Let's highlight our rocks over here. Still have my blue, green, black matte medium mixture and a bit of white. So you can start on that front face or the top face, whatever you like. But do streak it down a little here and there. Create other top faces within. So see right here, that's inside of this shape, but I just created another surface that's pointing up just by taking my brush side to side. So notice all of my brush strokes, no matter what color I'm using, they either kind of go side to side or at an angle this way or at an angle this way. I don't really have up and down or, you know, scattered. They're all kind of the same type of direction, one way or the other. And just like everything else, I just laid in my highlight, and then I can pick up my shadow color and come back, kick back any of those highlights that were too much, blend out any hard lines. And that's one of the things that the matte medium is good for. If you just are using paint and you slap down those highlights, when you come back to it to blend it out, it may be dry and it may be hard to do at that point. See, got a nice bright white spot there. And that looks kind of weird, but I'm not worried about it, because I'm going to come back in with my matte medium and my darker color. Super light pressure. And start taking it back a bit. Don't be afraid to get some bright white highlights in these front rocks. Anything closer to us is going to appear more saturated in color. The shadows are going to be darker, the highlights are going to be brighter. So if you get some nice dark shadows, that's why we used more black here, and some nice bright white highlights, that's going to help pull it forward and help push everything else back. Like our structures here, they're either rocks or a sunken city, whatever you want them to be. The difference between the highlight and the shadow is very, very subtle, which helps push it farther back into the water. But right here, we want to say maybe we're even sitting on these rocks. We're right in the middle of them. And so the shadows and highlights are going to be quite a bit brighter. But I'm working really loose. I'm not trying to, micromanage exactly what's happening here. Because like always, if I don't like something, I can take it back. I can get rid of it. And I think that that's where a lot of fear comes from when we're trying something new, is we don't know how to fix it if we don't like something. So, a lot of people get stressed out about making mistakes. Well, mistakes are how you learn. When you make a mistake while you're painting, the challenge is to learn how to fix that mistake, because you're always going to make mistakes while you're painting. I don't think it matters how long you've been painting. If you're painting, you're going to make a mistake. That's just how it is. But if you let mistakes frustrate you now and you don't learn how to fix them, then I don't think you're going to progress. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's what you do with those mistakes that matters and that counts. I feel like I want to go just a little bit brighter on the highlights on the front of the ship. So I'm getting some matte medium and some white, and I'm going to mix them together. And just really play up these highlights on the front here. Blending it back with a little more of my dark mixture so I don't have any hard stopping lines. A little bit of a darker color right in there to really make that seem deep and kind of recessed. Just really using a black-blue mixture. I'm just going to add one tattered old sail to this mast. You can add them to as many as you like. And I'm going to use this round brush. I'm going to mix up my blue-green. Just a hint of black. And a little matte medium. Now you can either have your sails kind of blowing in one direction if you like, or you can have it hanging straight down. The one thing you don't really want to do is follow the direction of this part. It wouldn't be hanging necessarily like that. It would either be hanging straight down if the water is very calm, or it might be blowing in one direction or the other. I'm going to have mine kind of maybe coming straight down. So I'm going to start from right here, right at the edge of my mast, put a little bit of pressure and kind of twirl my brush as I bring it down. And just do that here and there throughout. Let your brush kind of break up. That's going to make it seem a little bit more torn and old. See how as I bring it down, I've got heavier pressure here and I'm kind of turning my brush. You see how I'm rolling it just a little bit. It's all with my thumb. I'm just pushing the brush with my thumb and that makes it roll a little bit. And then as I bring it down, not only am I rolling, but I'm releasing my pressure so I get these nice thin little wisps at the end. Let's grab a little hint of white and just kind of add some highlights to it, kind of the same way. Mostly right up on this side. Just kind of rolling it a little as I bring it down. And letting that highlight streak out a bit. Super light pressure there just to get rid of any lines that I might not like. And I lost a little bit of my highlights on the post up here, but that's okay. I can just go back and add them in if I feel like I need them. I feel like I want one little bit on this piece here. And I feel pretty happy with that, so I'm just gonna sign it and call it done. I lied. I know that I always say that when I sign a painting, I'm done and I don't come back to it, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to do that I totally forgot to do. So I have a clean angle brush, no matte medium, just white paint, and I feel like I need some brighter white highlights just in a few places on my wave here. Before we do the last part, I'm going to take this brush that is clean and just damp and just come along the edge here wherever I have a chalk line, and I'm just lightly wiping. Make sure that your paint is dry before you go for it. If your paint's a little wet, you might smear it, but that chalk, just to show you, it comes off super easy just with a slightly damp brush. So all these little chalk lines, just wipe clean away. Very little effort. Typically, I would wait until the next day to do this, just to make sure everything's dry. But I get a lot of questions about how hard is it to get rid of the chalk, so that's why I'm showing you now. But you could even wait and do this just before you varnish in a couple of days. Okay, last part, and we really are done. I've got my round brush again, and there's a little extra drip of water in it. I'm gonna mix it in with some white paint. A little more water. You don't want the paint to flow, but you just want it nice and wet. Load up your brush with it. And I'm gonna add some bubbles, because a lot of times there's bubbles coming up from the ground in the ocean. And so remember that a lot of times when we're doing stars, I tell you to move your brush around like that when we splatter. But this time, I'm gonna tell you hold your brush straight up and down and keep it straight up and down, because then your bubbles will shoot in a line up and down, and it'll look like they're coming up from the bottom. So I'm gonna come from here and just hit. And I like to use this small round brush because my spray doesn't get out of control. You might not even be able to see that from there, but I'll show you close up in a minute. So straight up and down, take it from the ground all the way to the surface of your water. I'm gonna even mix just a little more water in there so I can get a little bit of a bigger splatter. Don't go crazy and do too many splatters and just make it a bubbly mess. Just get a couple of areas that have some nice up and down bubbles. See, now you can see some of the bubbles that we added on there. And they pretty much just move from the bottom up. It's pretty subtle, but it's a nice touch that I like to do. And there's our underwater shipwreck painting. You could get super creative with this painting and use completely different colors, maybe purples and magentas to get more of a fantasy type effect. You could do sunset colors, you could do anything you like. I'd really love to see what you do with this, so make sure you check out the video description below for links to where you can find me all over the internet, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe so you can paint with me each week. You can do so by clicking here. If you're ready to keep painting, check out these 2 videos that I've picked just for you. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.